everyone, and welcome back. Thank you for joining me. I'm Mrs. B and I'm here today to show you how to have fun with watercolour. I love teaching art and showing people how to use different materials. Today, come with me and I'll show you how to create this really bold, exciting and bright artwork of flowers using watercolours and sharpies. My last two lessons that I've posted are all about some technical things that you need to know when using watercolours, how to blend them together, how to use the water to your advantage, and how to create really structured artworks. This one is a little bit different. Now we're going to have some fun and we're going to just use some lines and shapes just to create a really beautiful artwork that looks something like this. It's upside down. So the main material for this task is watercolour paints, but I've also used a Sharpie over the top to add some detail. Today I'm going to show you how to create a bouquet of flowers and leaves using watercolour. An important part of watercolour is that you let colours play with one another, colours that are similar to one another. So for example, if I'm looking at my palette here, if I'm doing sort of this pinky red, I need to look at the colours that are directly near it when I'm blending colours. If I were to blend a colour that was, say, up here, like a green with my red, it's not going to combine very nicely. You're going to get a bit of a browny kind of mixture, and that's not ideal. So we want to keep the colours bright and vibrant, and my biggest tip for doing that is using harmonious colours that are next to each other. So I'm going to start off with a nice big flower. The great thing about watercolours is that there's a lot of room for error, but you do need to use quite a lot of water. I have done a few watercolour artworks in past videos if you'd like to have a look at learning some techniques for blending, but the main thing is to use a high density of water and to work with the colours while they're wet. I'm just starting off, I started off with a circle there and doing some sort of arch shapes around my initial circle there, creating a bit of the idea of a rose. Now notice my paint has gotten a little dry there. I need to add more water because it needs to be high volume of water with this. The reason is because now I'm going to go in with a harmonious colour like we were talking about earlier to add in drops of colour while it's wet. If I did that once it had dried, it would be a completely different effect. The colours wouldn't bleed and you're not going to get the desired effect. So I'm just adding in an extra bit of colour there. You do need to work fairly quickly without rushing, of course. So there you go. There you have it. That's my purpley, whoops, that's okay. Let's pretend that was meant to happen. That's my purpley red flower. I'm going to do the same thing now, a few different times, using different mixtures of harmonious colours. Start with a circle and add arches. I want to get up nice and close to my other flower here. You can always add in a third colour if you think it needs a little extra. So something to note is how the colours blend together really nicely. If you were to just do that with one colour, it would still look nice, but it would be quite a flat artwork. So adding in those extra layers of colour help to really round out the artwork. Now, it's not finished though. What I suggest at this point is just to add a few little extra, maybe different shaped flowers, if you like. But we need to continue to use the same technique. We don't just use one colour with our watercolour paints anymore. We consider what the harmonious colour would be. Add in a few droplets to let the colours bleed and blend. At this point, I would suggest leaving your flowers to completely dry. We are going to be doing some leaves around the outsides here, but they're going to be in greens, which are not harmonious colours. So if we have a wet colour here, the green is going to bleed in with this purple and it's going to create a really pooey brown. So we don't want that. We're going to take some time to let this dry. Won't take long at all before we do our next section. Now, in creating leaves that go around our flowers here, we're using the same idea of using different layers of colour. So I'm going to stay within the green family, but with my watercolour palette here, I have quite a few greens I can play with. So I'm going to start with this sort of darker green. Remember, you need a high quantity of water, and you can be quite organic with your shape. And then you can add in a second colour. Or stems of leaves like this. So notice I'm doing different types of leaves just to add interest to my overall artwork. I'm doing large ones here, I'm doing ones with stems and tiny little ones coming off. I've just got a line here with lots of little lines coming off it. I've done some swirls. Later I'm going to come in and add a few little dots like that. So try to mix it up. Now, any areas that are left blank, just go in and pop in little leaves like this, just to fill the whole composition full of interesting shapes. Now, you might have noticed I didn't have a plan for this artwork. I didn't sketch it out. I didn't necessarily know where everything was going to go when I started it. And that's such a brilliant thing about creating art, and particularly watercolors, because they sort of, to an extent, have a mind of their own. So let yourself be guided by the paint and really play with it. And I really believe that overall you'll be happy with your final product as long as you follow these sort of guidelines with the flowers on the inside and a few leaves around the outside. Now you notice when I'm doing these dots, if I do it over the top of dry paint like this, the colours do not merge. However, if I were to do it on top of wet paint, you can see that the paint spreads. So just be aware of that when you're going in with details. There. Now that I've filled my whole piece of paper full of colour, you could either choose to leave it like that. It is a very beautiful artwork. However, I'm going to go back in with a Sharpie afterwards just to add a few bits of detail to my leaves and my flowers, but it does need to be completely dry. Now that my artwork is dry, I can now go in. This is an optional part of the task. Look, if you're really happy with the level of detail and the color and everything that your watercolors have created, you don't have to do this step, but I'm going to show you what happens when you go back in over the top of your watercolors to add even more detail using some sort of pen or marker. I'm using a Sharpie permanent marker. They're quite thick, so my lines are going to be quite bold. If you're wanting something a little bit smaller, a little bit more detailed, something like this, a uni pin which has a finer tip is going to give you that level of detail you're looking for. Now there are some spots in my artwork that are still a little bit wet, so I have to try to work around them. And I'm going to try to add detail to my main middle flower here. So the way I'm going to do that is starting in this middle circle that we always started our flowers with the watercolor. I'm going to do a spiral. Like that. That kind of suggests the middle of the flower there. Now I'm going to come out and do a few petals. So I'm going to start here and kind of wobble, 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 then come back in. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, wobble, 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 and come back in. I'm going to repeat that process until I've filled this entire space with the flower. But this time when I do the next layer, I'm going to start it in the middle of this petal here. So I'm going to come out and come back in. Come out, come back in. There's no real rule to it. If you want the petals to be bigger, you'll obviously make them further apart like this. But the idea is just to continue on bringing the petals around like that. There. Another thing you could do instead, of course, is do your spiral in the middle. But this time you might choose to bring the petals out like this and bring them back in. So starting from the spiral, coming back out, in, kind of looks more like a poppy, and in, out, and in. Notice I'm kind of wobbly. You can even add some extra sort of detail lines like this coming out. So there's different types of flowers you can do. With this one here, that one's completely different entirely. You might do more kind of detailed long petals. You don't have to follow the exact petals you did underneath. You're kind of just using the shape as a guide for your drawing. Bring them out. Okay. I'm making this one look quite close. You can see my lines are quite close together, just to show you the difference. Some might argue that these lines take away from my watercolor. Others would say it adds to it. Again, it just comes down to your personal preference and where you want to take your artwork. I thought I'd just show you what happens. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the leaves, as you can see here. Just sort of outlining the general idea of the leaf, adding a few extra details. Now, I've been quite sketchy in the way I'm drawing, and it's creating a bit of a busy artwork. You know, I'm not being too fussy when I'm drawing my leaves. I'm sort of just giving the idea of a leaf like that, rather than sort of planning it out too much. You might choose to do the same thing. Otherwise, if you obviously are really careful with it, your artwork will be much neater than mine. So it's as simple as that. I hope you've been able to follow the steps to create an artwork just like this one. and enjoyed working with our watercolour series in the last few lessons. I really hope you've enjoyed using watercolours in a really fun, exciting, kind of fluid and random way to create a beautiful bouquet of flowers, and adding detail with a Sharpie over the top to add interest and make your artwork even more bold. Please make sure that you comment and subscribe to the Artlife YouTube channel for future videos so that I can continue making them for you. Please also comment and like this page with anything that you would like to see in the future. Have fun getting creative.